How do we remain faithful in the valley? Our reflection today is taken from Psalm 23, verse 4, which says that even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. In our society, in our world today, we often celebrate the mountaintops in our lives. We celebrate the successes, we celebrate the promotions, the weddings, the engagements, the graduations, the victories in our lives. But many of us, we forget that there is going to be a valley in our life as well. That reading from Psalm 23, verse 4, doesn't say that if I walk through the darkest valley, it says, even though I walk through the darkest valley, meaning that we are going to experience low points in our lives. We are going to experience challenges. We are going to walk through the valley, even though you might be experiencing the mountaintop right now. But the question is, will you walk faithfully? Will you walk with purpose? And will you walk knowing that God is with you? We need to understand that a shepherd, in shepherding his sheep, doesn't abandon the sheep when he sees that the road becomes dangerous, that the terrain becomes difficult. That's when his presence matters the most. In Psalm 23, verse 4, we read that the rod and the staff is there. The rod is used to protect and to guide, and the staff is there to support and to comfort. We also need to get into this mindset of that being faithful in the valley doesn't mean that you pretend that everything is fine. It doesn't mean that you go and smile through the pain. It doesn't mean that you never doubt. It doesn't mean that you are this person who just avoids everything because in your mind, everything is still fine. What that faithfulness does mean is that you continue walking forward, continuing to trust, continuing to show up, even though you might not feel like it at times. The challenge for each of us is to remain faithful even in the valley, even though you might have gotten the news of the terminal disease and that diagnosis, the relationship which might have ended, a failure in your life, of you falling, of you sinning, in seeing a loved one suffer. That's when we move truly from theology and moving into practically applying our faith. All of us need to understand that we don't need to fear the valley. We don't need to allow ourselves to be consumed by that anxiety, that stress, that depression. Why? Because we need to understand that God, our shepherd, is with us. As Psalm 23, verse 4 says, God is with us in the valley. I was reading a very interesting story of the late songstress Nightbirde. She passed away from cancer. And in this blog post that she wrote and she penned down that before the age of 30, she had already gotten 3 different types of cancers. She's gotten cancer thrice before the age of 30. Doctors said that she would die. Her husband left her because he couldn't see himself loving someone who was riddled with cancer. So he left her. And there she was all alone on the bathroom floor after a vomiting session, and she was having this wrestle with God. Where is God in all of this? I'm not even 30 years old yet, and I have had cancer thrice already. My husband has left me. I feel so alone. And as she was laying there on the bathroom floor, in her weakness, at her lowest point in her life, that is when she found God. In her piece that she had written, she wrote, "Many people claim to never have found God because they don't look low enough." I repeat that. Many people claim to have not found God because they don't look low enough. That is so profound. That is so powerful. We need to understand that God is with us. God is on the bathroom floor with us. God is in the kitchen with us. God's in the toilet with us. God's in the car with us. God is in the valley with us. We are not alone. In the psalm, the psalmist is walking through, not camping or staying in the valley, going through it. We need to understand truly that this is when purpose enters the picture here. Purpose is found in the valley. We need to understand that if life was just the mountaintop, how would we grow? How would we learn? How would we be molded and formed and broken and made into the people that God wants us to be? How would we be refined if life was just about the mountaintop? The honest truth about this all is that we would remain comfortable. And the sad reality is that we will remain spiritually shallow. In the valley, we become who God created us to be. I like what one speaker once said. Life doesn't happen to you, life happens for you. I repeat that. Life doesn't happen to you, life happens for you. Sometimes the valley, as tough as it is, happens at a certain time in our lives for a certain reason. Again, for us to learn, for us to grow, for us to be refined into who God wants us to be. We need to understand two things here. The first thing, the most important of it all, and a lot of times when we go through the most in life, we forget this. The first and the most important is that in the valley, God is with us. And the second is that community matters in the valley. God's rod and God's staff often comes through his people. I'd like to speak to two groups of people right now, and it's the bulk and the majority of who I'm currently speaking to. First is, if you are going through the valley right now, you need to remember that God has not abandoned you. I love that song, Waymaker, Miracle Worker. And there's a line, especially at the bridge, which says that even though you might not see him, even though you might not feel him, even though you might not be experiencing him in your own mindset and ideology right now, it doesn't mean that God is not working. It doesn't mean that God is not there. It does not mean that God had abandoned you in this valley in your life. It's an invitation for you to grow in your faith. The second group of people I'd like to speak to right now are those who are at the mountaintops in their lives, through the success, through the victories, through you going through a great time in your life where there's just light and you're consumed by it. You need to use this season to build up reserves, to build an intimate relationship with God. Because when the valley comes, and it will, because the psalmist in Psalm 23 verse 4 rightly says, even though I walk through the darkest valley, you will get through it. Build up those reserves and understand that even when that valley does come, whatever it is, that you are never alone, that God is with you. I leave you with this. Remember to walk faithfully, to walk in purpose and to live in purpose, and know that even in the darkest valley, God is with you.